Hello everyone, and this is the newest member of my collection. I've been waiting for a while to fill out my Tandy computer collection. I've always kind of wanted one from each of the eras. So in a sense, the Model 134 era, here represented in the Model 4, and the color computer. And then, of course, the Model 21216 line on the Model 16, and the very popular Tandy 1000 line. And of course, the Apple II isn't really in the lineage, but is there because an original Apple II is what made me want a computer as a kid in the first place. Well, anyway, I've also wanted one of their last-gen MS-DOS machines, so that's the 486 era, right about the time that Tandy got out of the biz. And this 4825SX fits the bill pretty perfectly, other than maybe a Sensation 2, which was designed by Tandy, but the name on the door changed to AST by the time they went from pre-production to production. This is the last of what I would call the real Tandy computers, this low-profile case and design, the non-commodity parts. It's really kind of the last of the Tandy lineage. And this machine, a 4825SX hard drive, is identical to its brother, the 4850EP, with one exception. The 4850EP comes with a 486 DX 50 MHz processor, and the switch on the motherboard is set to 486DX instead of SX. But in terms of this 4825, it normally comes with a 25 MHz 486SX. As I noted, same motherboard as the 4850EP, but it is, upgradable. So the keyboard did not come with it. If you saw my video on CPM on the Model 16, I had alluded to the keyboard and mouse. I had bought them kind of in preparation for trying to acquire one of these machines, and this one came up. And when I got this one, I was completely expecting it to be stock. I was hoping to get the 4 MB of RAM that would come in it and not have it have been scavenged. I was also hoping, I didn't expect a CD drive or anything like that. I was also really just hoping that the thing would be functional. I didn't even do a hard drive in it. I was going to use a compact flash card in it instead and connect it to the IDE controller. So when I got the machine and got it plugged in, I was pleasantly surprised. So in it is 20 megabytes of RAM. The first bank 0 has the original 4 megs from Radio Shack, and then bank 1 has another 16 for a total of 20. Also in there, of course, is this nice Creative Labs CD drive, which appears to be a 2X drive, and as best as I can recall, performs like a 2X drive. And then inside the case was what was really surprising. There is a SoundBlaster AWE-32 in there with its own 8 megs of RAM for wavetable synth. And my greatest surprise, there is a Intel DX OverDrive processor in there that takes the 25 megahertz bus and triples it to 75 megahertz. So I have a 75 megahertz processor in there running on the base 25 megahertz bus. And so with that, the machine is running in 486 DX mode. Okay, that's 3 minutes of talk. Let's actually power this thing on and see what it does. Oh, and the monitor is just a Dell LCD. I don't have a Tandy monitor. If I find a good quality Tandy monitor from the period, I'll look at it. It's got to be local and reasonably priced. I'm not going to go crazy. And then the speakers are actually Altec Lansings from the late 90s, 98, 99. But they do the job. And for a multimedia computer of this era, I figured it was kind of acceptable to sub them out, at least for now. This machine is going to be a game night edition. We're going to use it in addition to the Tandy 1000 and the Apple II, and the Model 4 and color computer here and there too, to play games on. So let's get it fired up. This was after the Tandy copyright had disappeared off the BIOS ROMs. I think even on the 2500 RSX, it was gone by then. I had one of those at one point, and that did not have the Tandy copyright, if I recall. Now, this machine, I've only had it a short time, but what I've done here is I've put 3 different operating systems on it. I have OS2 Warp 3, I have Windows 95 OSR2, and then I have Windows 3.1, and I make use of the multiple configuration option in MS-DOS 6.2, so that I can have configurations with EMS, no EMS, start Windows, don't start Windows, right from a boot menu. So we'll start each one of these up and take a look at that. So let's start with OS2 first. And interestingly enough, I was able to get drivers for pretty much everything. The only thing I really struggled with, and I'm still looking for reliable drivers for, is the Western Digital video controller drivers for Windows 3.1. Right now I'm using the generic SVGA driver. But, I mean, for that for that installation, most of the games on there are DOS-based anyway, and Windows isn't running, so I'm not sweating it too much, but there is definitely a bit of a desire to do it. The drivers that I keep running into are either Cirrus Logic drivers that don't really work, but are labeled as this for this machine, or are Windows 3.0 drivers, so either way, we're not dealing with that. So this is OS2 Warp 3.0, and I figured it was fun. OS2 actually, believe it or not, actually is somewhat responsible for my career. The Color Computer 3 is the impetus of my career, really, the kind of the founding nugget or nucleus. But my OS2 experience actually got me one of my first real jobs in college and in networking, so it was all up from there. So I credit OS2 with a lot, and I figured it would be fun to have it on here, so I did put it on here, and I just kind of figured I would play around with it. OS2 is interesting because with WinOS2 I can run, actually I'll just do this, Windows Programs. You can run Windows programs, Windows 3.1 programs right on top of OS2. They can either be in their own desktop, separate screen, just like Windows 3.1, or you can run them as native Windows mixed with other OS2 windows, just like this. And that's pretty cool to be able to do that. And the neat thing about Windows 3.1 on this is WinOS2 processes, the WinOS2 process can destroy everything running within itself, but in typical Windows 3.1 cooperative multitasking fashion, but it can't take down OS2 with it for the most part. There's some exceptions to that, but it generally can't. So that's OS2. Oh, didn't want to do that. So let's give this thing a reboot and take a look at Windows 95. If I don't close these windows, they'll reopen on startup. Those OS2 sounds are like a blast from the past. Control-Alt-Del. And you won't have to wait for the memory test this time. Floppy seek. And let's do Windows 95. Now this is Windows 95 OSR2. And those of you who may nitpick the OSR2 might say, where's the Microsoft Internet Explorer boot logo? Yeah, I deleted logo.sys because I hate that Internet Explorer boot logo. And if you delete logo.sys in the root directory, it reverts back to the logo that's embedded in IOSys. So, that. I don't think Internet Explorer is something to be advertising. It wasn't even then. This came with IE2 and it sucked. So right now, I don't have much on here, but I do have the AWE-32 card installed and all of its utilities. I'll make that a capital T just to make sure this thing says it right. I haven't actually tried this, so let's see what this sounds like.
Hello, Yada World from TJB Chris.
I typed Yopper. Let's fix that. YouTube, and we're gonna have Paul say it this time. Maybe he'll slow it down.
Hello, YouTube World from TJB Chris.
YouTube. I guess if I put the space in there. One of these things with these early text-to-speech things is you learned how to.
Hello, YouTube World from TJB Chris.
You learned how to space things, because if I type, I'm not going to type it because people go nuts. But there's certain words that you learn how to deal with. Also on here are two different editions of You Don't Know Jack Volume 1 and Volume 2. And this is the original one that if you type FU to it, spell it out, it will actually swear back at you. So this is a classic version and kind of a prized possession now. The re-released version of it that came with this pack had it changed to Are You Flipping Me Off, which was lame. And now let's take a look at Windows 3.1 and MS-DOS. The trick to getting this thing built was installing OS2 first. You have to install OS2 first because OS2 can get Boot Manager on there. And then Boot Manager is nice because it quote-unquote hides the other partitions. And the way that it does that is it just adds 1 to the front of the partition ID. So if it's 07 like HPFS or NTFS, it becomes 17. If it's 0B for FAT32, it becomes 1B. And it knows to distinguish them. And this way too, things like Windows 3.1 MS-DOS and Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 will ignore each other's partitions because the type doesn't match whatever it's expecting, and it won't even look at the file system if the type doesn't match. So it's a great way to do that. And I didn't want that to happen, so apparently it was going to boot anyway. Windows 3.1. So here I mentioned earlier I used the multiple config option in MS-DOS. So I have 3 options here. Windows 3.1 with no EMS, Windows or MS-DOS with no EMS, and then MS-DOS with 4 megs of EMS for Pinball World, and also Wing Commander if I get that installed on here. So let's do the Windows 3.1 startup. And I'm not going to do all 3 of these startup options. You know what they do. But I figured I'll do the Windows one. And I'll pop a couple of games out here and show you what they look like. And of course it's Windows 3.1. And of course we have all the AWE-32 stuff here. And we've got your typical Windows BS. So yep, this is Windows 3.1. Very cool. Let's just exit that. This will end my Windows session. And because this is a Game Night PC, I put together a rudimentary menu that people could use to get this thing to whatever they want. So if someone boots it into DOS and they want to play any one of these games that are installed, they can. The cut in there is me coughing, so I edited it out. So let's watch Doom. Doom actually runs remarkably well on this. I'm pretty happy with it. I did not expect it to run so well. I ran Doom once on a 486SX33, and it wasn't quite this nice. The detail here is high, and the screen's almost max size, and the only reason it's not max is because I like the HUD on the bottom. But it's very playable. This machine doesn't meet the minimum requirements for Quake. That's a Pentium 75, so we'll never be running that here, but that's not really the point. And then I'd mentioned my 2500 RSX earlier that I used to have. My brother used to like to try to play a game on it called One Must Fall 2097, but the 386SX and that 2500 RSX was so slow that the game was unplayable. The robots moved at a snail's pace. It was not good. So I thought I would try it here and see what it looked like on a 486 with overdrive. And I think this particular machine is the perfect speed for this game. The music for this game was always enticing. Just let the thing play itself for a minute. I always like the trash talk at the beginning. It's all lame 90s era big talk. But this is actually pretty good. And on the 386SX, that first hit would still be going on and he'd still be flying up the wall. So this is much better. This is actually pretty playable. So I think it's very playable. So it was kind of cool to see this actually work. And somebody already lost. And I love this. If you want, you can play on an IPX-SPX network. That's fun. Break out your netware systems. I'd love to see a school or some other place with this rolling around their network. Oh, I don't know what I did there. I must have probably done Wolf 3D and typed the menu wrong. Yep, okay, let's fix that. Guess I have to fix my menu. Okay, and of course the classic Wolfenstein 3D. And this is not the shareware version. And of course this game did run reasonably playably on the 386SX, but it was fun to have, so I figured I would add this. Basically this machine's going to be for any of those late 80s, early 90s games that are just too powerful or require too much power, that the Tandy 1000 can't run them, but something I'd still like to run on classic hardware, something like this. You know, yes, I can run this on a laptop or a regular desktop, but why? And we'll just let the demo get started here, and then that'll be it. So, and of course it's amazing how kind of primitive it looks, but at the same time how amazing this game was. So So that is basically it. And of course, we got Prince of Persia on there. We've got Lemmings on there. And I'll put more games on as we go. And of course, you know, I got to relive some good old MS-DOS fun. I actually, not too sad about that. 616K, largest executable program size. You know, something in the 620s would be nicer, but I mean, for anything I'm going to run on this, when I first did it out of the box and didn't tune it, I think we were looking at 540K or 550K. So that includes the mouse driver and EMM386 and smart drive cache and all that other stuff. So all in all, this thing's pretty cool. Let me hit the reset button and we'll just go into the setup utility. Just gonna keep smacking it until it beeps. Okay. And typical Tandy setup utility. I know it doesn't say it, but in most of these machines, even some of the later 2500s, you could push F2 right after the memory count was ending and get into the setup program. Not much to see here. You know, the hard drive selection is your typical, your typical selection of standard drive sizes. I don't want that. And you could tell it to ignore the hard drive and ignore the floppy controller, and the bus speed for the isobus you could do faster or slower. I haven't tried enhanced yet to see if that actually borks up the sound card or not, but I probably should. Let's escape with extra without saving. And that is pretty much it. I'm really looking forward to breaking this thing out and including it with the Tandy 1000 and the Apple II as part of my arsenal of game night machines. So until next time, thanks for watching.